Hello and welcome to Soberanía, the Mexican Politics Podcast. I'm your co-host, José Luis Ceja, Mexican journalist living and working here in Mexico City. I'm a staff writer and host of the podcast over at Venezuela Analysis, as well as a presenter on Sin Muros on Mexico's Canal 11. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Kurt Hackbarth. Kurt, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you very much. My name is Kurt Hackbarth, writing for Jacobin American in the United States.
Kurt, not to interrupt your snack time here, but I'm having a little trouble understanding you. What do you say? I mean, I guess I know the script by heart now, but I can't quite make out what you're saying. What are you eating there?
Well, I'm enjoying a lovely chocolate de bienestar, José Luis.
Oh my goodness! How'd you get your hands on one?
This is socialist.
How lucky!
A socialist chocolate bar, José Luis.
I imagine that socialist chocolate bar.
People just went off on it when it was announced this past week, didn't they?
You're absolutely right. Actually, putting here on the screen this video from the Mexico Solidarity Media Web's Twitter account. By the way, if you're not following it, follow it now. Which got over 10 million views somehow.
10 million views! I mean, that's even beyond Dr. Evil level there. Yeah. It's true. There's now going to be a socialist chocolate bar that's going to cost 14 pesos. So that's like 75 US cents. 50% cacao.
That's nice. Good.
I mean, where are you going to get a chocolate bar that's 50% cacao? And there's also going to be, I'm looking here, the bar format. There's also going to be chocolate en polvo and powder, and then for table chocolate as well. All made with cacao from Tabasco and from the north of Chiapas, provided by small producers. And that's what this is all about, you know. This is the Tiendas del Bienestar program. This is the Bienestar, or the well-being stores. People have made certain comparisons with Mamdani's plan for public grocery stores in New York City.
In fact, I got this tweet here up on the screen. Zoran should cut a deal with President Sheinbaum to get the Mexican socialist chocolate bar. Come on.
We shouldn't be the only ones to enjoy it.
It should be the only chocolate bar available in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
That's it. Socialist chocolate, and stuff it if that's what you don't want.
You gotta love the comparison here. Like when Hugo Chavez used to fly oil shipments up to the projects.
Basically, it's the same thing.
Basically the same thing.
Same vibe, right?
Yes. We are happy to share with you our socialist chocolate bars.
Now, full disclosure, this isn't actually a chocolate de bienestar because they're not in the market yet, but they're on their way. So it's a good prop. And, you know, and on a serious note, this is actually a really good initiative because it's not just going to be chocolate. They're going to be these well-being stores starting in poor and more remote areas to be able to sell other staples like corn, like beans, like coffee, like honey, sourced from small producers at fair prices and sold at fair prices in public stores. Because as we know, the supermarkets, like the banks, like the internet companies, and like a long list of et cetera, cherry pick. Mm-hmm. And they will only put supermarkets in places where it's profitable for them, like anything else, right? Mm-hmm. And at the prices they set, and from the producers they choose, right? And and as we know how people get, screwed, the producers for supermarkets and such. So now we have a setup where these stores are going to be going to places where they are needed, with fair trade, with fair prices for producers, and also a fair price at the end for the end consumer. Pretty good deal all around. And it was really funny to see how many people lost their shit.
That's why I got 10 million views.
About a public chocolate bar.
There was the commotion that it stirred.
Yeah. So here's to chocolate de bienestar.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share the rundown with you. Kurt, did you finish introducing yourself? You know the usual.
Everybody knows who I am.
Super talented guy. You know it. All right, we're going to be talking about tariffs. I don't like talking about tariffs, but we have to because Trump keeps going right back to them. So we got to get into it because, in a lot of ways, it's defining the Mexico-U.S. relationship. So we got to get into that. We're going to talk about shifting attitudes around migration in the U.S. and around attitudes in Mexico towards the United States. Mm-hmm. It's not just about what's happening there, but what's happening here as well.
Right.
We want to talk about the Hague Group's Emergency Ministerial Conference. This is basically what we've been really beating the drum for. More action.
That's right.
Something needs to happen. Mexico is there. They were a bit of a late sign up, but they're there.
Better late than never.
Better late than never.
Absolutely on this.
So we're recording this on July 15th. This will come out on July 16th.
The second day of the conference.
The second day of the conference. We're hoping really important things come out of this because it's more
not just a symbolic communique, and then they all pat themselves on the back for being on the right side of things. Yeah. There has to be concrete measures.
And of course, our friends who are involved with some of the organization of this have really been stressing that. This is meant to be a turning point. So here's hoping that happens. And of course, count on our support when it comes to that. So that's why we're bringing this information, talk a little bit more what's going on there. And then, of course, losers and haters, we have a special one for you. A certain lawyer who reminds me of a very specific scene in The Wire. I'm going to leave you with that. So you tune into the end. If you're a fan of The Wire, watch the reference all the way at the end. Okay. First item on the agenda is Trump's tariff man. You can see this image here from a political cartoonist, a friend of the show as well. Trump is tariff man, the man with zero decency. Of course, a riff on the Superman poster.
That he himself posted on the White House official account. Right?
Yeah, with his face photoshopped.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. If there's anything, we were talking about this over coffee today, right? You know, I'm not a big superhero guy, but I do like Superman. Precisely because what he represents. Superman is an alien who's trying to figure out what it means to be human. And his answer to that, no spoilers, but his answer to that is to be human is to serve the others, is to protect humanity, to defend humanity. And I always thought that that was actually a really progressive message, particularly given when Superman emerged as a comic and everything, all the different iterations it's gone through. So what a big insult to see Trump's ugly orange face. Superman on Superman's body. Kind of the total opposite. But hey,
it's so cringe. But, you know, it's following on Millet's doing the exact same thing a few months back, right?
Ugh. All right, let's get to the first story here. Trump threatens steep tariffs on goods from the European Union and Mexico. Leaders from both economies have been trying to negotiate more favorable terms, only to have those efforts blown up by form letters. And in the case of Mexico, interestingly enough, they got this form letter, this copy-paste, which used a lot of the same language that a lot of countries got.
Right.
Quite literally, when they were already at the negotiating table with a high-level delegation in Washington talking about security, migration, trade, all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden, boom, this bomb drops on them. And of course, in the moment, the economy minister, Marcelo Ebrard, mentioned that they were in total disagreement with this and that they saw it as an unjust action.
Well, it's just a stupid insult, too.
Take it away.
Drop the letter on them while they're at the negotiating table there in Washington?
It's absurd.
Yeah. They do it just to antagonize, or they're just that stupid.
Yeah. I think part of it is that, right? Like, this is Trump. A lot of things happen in the Trump White House that aren't Trump. But these letters, they're the text of it, the delivery of it, the timing of the delivery, that's Trump. This is Trump being an asshole. This is him thinking that this is how you negotiate with your number one trading partner.
Now, just to set the scene, those of us who, of course, follow the show know the analysis we've been doing about this over the last several months. We've been here before, and we know this movie. As soon as Trump won in November, he threatened Mexico and Canada with tariffs. That they were going to take place as soon as he took office. So he takes office on January 20th. Sin Muro starts on January 21st over at Canal 11. We just finished our second season. So check out our season finale over there. We'll be back for a third season in a couple of weeks. So, you know, on February 1st, Trump follows through. He says, we're going to do these tariffs, right? Of course, there was blowback. You know, Sheinbaum initiated her cool head strategy, you know, of dealing with Trump. And Trump says, all right, we're going to postpone them for a month until March 1st, right? And then March 1st comes around. Then he actually puts the tariffs on and takes them off, right? Then there was going to be the whole Liberation Day thing at the beginning of April, right? When, you know, he came out with that whole table of countries that were going to be tariffed, including the islands off the coast of Australia.
The uninhabited islands.
That only have penguins, right? You know, and Mexico was not included in the list in April because they came to the agreement that anything was under the free trade agreement. You know, the USMCA was not going to be tariffed. Besides things that are being tariffed for everybody, which is steel, aluminum, auto parts, except for parts of the car that's manufactured in the U.S., blah, blah, blah. So then Trump said, all right, we're going to do a 90-day hold on Liberation Day. And so now the 90 days are up. And so the whole thing is back again. But when you threaten somebody this many times with something, obviously the threat begins to lose its force. Not only because of the threat itself, but because of the simple fact that they didn't even seem to be knowing what they were doing when they sent the letter. right? While the Mexican negotiators were there. Does it apply, as the economist Justin Wolfer has actually pointed out, does it apply to products that are under the free trade agreement, under the USMCA, or not under the USMCA? The letter was saying one thing, they were briefing to reporters something else.
I found lots of conflicting information about it.
Because they weren't clear themselves.
It's not clear.
And then that's only aggravated by this carousel of pretexts as to why they're doing the tariffs in the first place. Is it because of fentanyl? Is it because of
the trade deficit?
The trade deficit, right? Because the United States has a trade deficit with Mexico, but then the United States has a trade surplus with Brazil, and they're getting slapped with a 50% tariff anyway. Is it because of this desire to bring manufacturing back to the United States? Is it because they want to create, leverage for trade deals, the supposed 90 deals in 90 days? Is it because of illegal migration? Is it because of the dollar as reserve currency? Is it because they just blew a $3 trillion hole in the U.S. finances because of the new budget and they need to find money somewhere desperately? Is it because of that? Is it because of, and then they're just the list of countries that they're bullying besides Mexico, right? Canada for its digital services tax, which they caved in on.
They caved.
Spain, higher defense, they want the NATO countries to kick in 5% of their GDP on defense. Brazil to release Bolsonaro. Other countries because they opposed U.S. bombardments on Iran. So it's actually a punitive measure. It has nothing to do with raising money or because of fentanyl or because of migration or because of trade deals. It's simply a punitive measure.
I think
it's all of that rolled into one, or what is it?
I think in the case of Brazil, it's worth expanding upon.
Yeah.
And that is very much a punitive measure. And why that should worry us as Mexicans. Because it's obvious that the real motivation isn't a trade deficit because they don't have one with Brazil. They're actually one of the few countries in the world where they don't. It's not because of unfair trade practices or whatever else the letter may have accused the Brazilian state of engaging in. It's because of Bolsonaro. In fact, there was an interesting piece in the New York Times which talked about some of the thinking behind it. And according to their sources, it was Trump directly who decided to punish Brazil with these steep tariffs over the Bolsonaro issue. In fact, there had been lots of lobbying happening from Bolsonaro's camp to say, oh, no, you should sanction the judge.
Yeah.
And Trump, on his own, decides, no, let's punish the whole country.
We're going to do the whole country.
And it's the clearest example for me of the use of tariffs in a weaponized manner as unilateral coercive measures. It might as well be sanctions, right? Like how they abuse and mistreat Venezuela and deny them the ability to sell oil on the international market, how they're trying to steal Citgo from under their noses, right? This is why it's important to defend sovereignty everywhere, because if they can get away with it in a place like Venezuela that's been demonized, they can do it in a place like Brazil. And if they can do it in Brazil, they can do it to Mexico, right? That's really the warning. Now, of course, the legality of this is actually, I think, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, but there is no actual basis for this, right? And in fact, there's lots of speculation.
As you mentioned today on the show, right? On
but it doesn't matter, right? Is the Supreme Court really going to stop him after they just finished opening up the path for him to gut the Department of Education, to destroy the ability to issue injunctions at a nationwide level?
To send people to South Sudan?
I mean, it's very quite likely that he's going to get away with this, and even not, he's just going to flout it, right? I mean, what are they going to do? He's shown himself to totally disregard the institutions of the judicial branch in the United States.
Right.
And so this should be seen as the clearest warning yet that something similar could happen to us, right? He's so hot and cold on this issue. We've talked him out of it, what, three times? And then
this is the fourth.
This is the fourth. What, I mean, I trust Sheinbaum. I think she's got a good team. I think she in particular is very skilled at dealing with Trump. But what if we can't convince him this time? What's going to happen to our economy? And this is the point that all of us are making on Sin Muros today, which is that we have to not abandon the United States. That would be foolish and it would be self-destructive. But we have to insist more on a different kind of relationship with the rest of the world. We have to have a plan B, C, D, the way that Sheinbaum talks all the time when it comes to our trade relationships, because this could blow up tomorrow. And that's a very serious problem for the country.
It's no longer optional, it's obligatory.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
There's been a lot of kind of abstract talk about multilateralism and living in a multipolar world. That's now. That can't be postponed anymore.
Yeah.
And it's being so clear, you know, with these arbitrary, dumb, economically illiterate, punitive, bullying, on again, off again tariffs. Is Mexico going to continue to be at the mercy of, you know, that idiot guy in a superhero suit?
A tariff man? No.
A tariff man?
Yeah, it shouldn't be. It's not smart.
Is this going to come out every few months?
This isn't sort of my instinctual anti-US kind of attitude, right? This is actually a very serious threat that has to be approached with that level of seriousness. Now, I wanted to ask you, Kurt, what's your opinion of the Mexican government's approach? Now, we know, just a bit of a recap, they have been stressing cabeza fría, cool head. Let's not provoke the US anymore. Let's trust our negotiating team. We need to stress how much they need us and as much as we need them, all the rest of it. Obviously, that has worked in the past. That has been what got Trump to back down. But
temporarily.
We're 6 months into this government. I mean, are we going to go round and round on this carousel for the next 3.5 years? It's not a sustainable place for the country.
Because even if Mexico doesn't get tariffed, ultimately, the uncertainty of it still hurts Mexico economically.
Oh, absolutely.
Why are you going to, you know, invest in Mexico or this and that with all of the uncertainty around it? You know, Trump creates his own flight from risk. No, Mexico is not a risk as an investment, right? The peso is stable, you know, all the macroeconomic indicators are stable, but still, whenever there is world economic uncertainty, there's always a flight from risk and always into safer currencies and safer markets. Right, or perceived to be safer markets. And that always hits, you know, emerging markets. However stable they are, they get hit for it. And that's what's happening here, right? Well, that's the risk of what could happen here. Right? Even if the tariffs don't happen. But just yesterday, you know, they slapped 17% tariffs on Mexican tomatoes.
Just like that.
Just like that. And we've been around here before, right?
This time because of dumping.
Well, that goes back to Trump 1. That goes back 5 or 6 years ago. They've been accusing dumping to cover for the fact that the U.S. doesn't make enough of its own tomatoes. 2 out of 3 tomatoes in the United States that are consumed come from Mexico. United States does make some, you know, produce some tomatoes in Florida, and the Florida growers want this tariff on Mexico. But you think the United States is going to stop importing Mexican tomatoes? It's just going to be more expensive for the consumer. All of this to pay for Trump's tax cuts for the rich, for his buddies. You're not getting a tax cut on your IRS form, a tax increase in your IRS form. You're getting it in the supermarket. That's where the tax increase is. And it's just dumb. The United States can't produce enough of its own tomatoes. And that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen. It's like Brazilian coffee. The United States simply climate-wise cannot produce enough coffee. They make some coffee and produce some coffee in Hawaii, far from enough for the domestic market. Okay. So when Lula does counter tariffs, it's just going to raise the price of Brazilian coffee, and that's it.
And one of the things that we were talking about today, and we'll get to this in our next segment in just a minute, is just that this obviously is also yet another fissure in his governing coalition.
Yeah.
Like when that really starts to hit people's pocketbooks. I mean, there's already discontent because he promised to lower the cost of groceries. He hasn't. He's raised them, if anything. Where that's just going to continue to simmer. That's continuing to undermine his support. Right? He's a very fragile coalition right now. I know he purports to be powerful, untouchable, but he isn't.
And, you know, we were talking also before the program, you know, the whole Epstein issue has simply been a spark that has set off a whole other series of other fissures, right, in this fragile coalition you mentioned. They promised there was going to be, you know, transparency in Epstein. The show isn't about that. But that has set off so many other things. One of them is about tariffs, because part of the base wants tariffs. Another part doesn't, for obvious reasons. One part of the base was in favor of the big, beautiful bill. The Elon Muskians were against it, right? So watch out, because sometimes the spark comes from where you don't expect it. Like the whole chocolate bar thing set off a very interesting wow, Mexico is doing interesting things. You maybe didn't expect the chocolate bar to set it off, but it did. So Epstein is setting off all kinds of fissures that have to do with deeper economic issues as well, which are only going to be aggravated when the effects of the tariffs are actually felt, because they haven't really been felt yet.
I don't think so. This whole Epstein thing, too, really came as a surprise for me. I mean, it's the first time I saw MAGA waver when it comes to Trump. You know, he used to talk about him being invincible, that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue,
right,
and nothing would affect his poll numbers. Well, for once, he
got ratioed on Truth Social.
Yeah, are like, no, this is important to us, and it's their own doing. They're the ones who made a bunch of noise.
Yep.
And now they're paying the price for it. Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. Before we move on to our next topic here, I do want to talk about, I have this article here up on the screen from El País. Mexico responds cautiously to Trump's latest tariff barrage. Again, that kind of cool head. Yeah. But now we're not in the business of reporting rumors here, but we're going to share this with you because it came across our screens.
You know, podcasts, you know.
Yeah, we can play with this.
There's a little room to play with some rumor here, right?
There are rumors that there is discontent within the Mexican government over Foreign Minister Juan Ramón de las Fuentes carrying out of his duties as Foreign Minister for Mexico, precisely because he's so passive. Now, like I said, we're not really in the business of propagating rumors, but the reason that I find it a little bit convincing why there might be something to this, and we'll see in a couple of weeks if it's true or not, is that apparently some of his people that he paid have already been removed from the posts inside of the bureaucracy of the Secretariat of Foreign Relations. That's telling. I think if that's actually true, if there actually has been movement there, there might be an element to this, him being shown the door relatively soon.
Right. Now, Juan Ramón de la Fuente is not a figure who is liked or loved or respected on the Mexican left because, you know, we know his bad track record is the ex-rector of the UNAM.
Yep.
At the time of the strike.
That's right.
Right? Called the cops into an autonomous campus.
Yep.
So, you know, he's got that black mark against him going back to the time of that strike. But, you know, even over these last, 6 months or so, a little bit more, he's been totally absent as a cabinet figure. I mean, totally and utterly absent. Just nowhere to be seen. Occasionally at the Mañanera, mumbling through a script. But that's it.
We've heard more from Gertz Manero.
We've heard more from
who was totally absent in the last
the Attorney General, right?
Then we have from Juan Ramón de la.
At a time when U.S.-Mexico relations have never been more critical, or, hardly ever. You would think you would need a chancellor who was on top of it, right? Remember how much of a showboat Marcelo Ebrard was as the chancellor for AMLO? How much of a showboater? And he's still showboating he's the economy secretary now. He's basically still doing it.
Oh, yeah. He spends a lot of time in Washington. He's got his own office there.
He's got his own offices there separately. But, Claudia Sheinbaum knew who he was when she appointed him. So that has to be factored in as well. She knew who he was. Now, the rumor suggests that maybe AMLO wanted him more than she did. I don't know enough to say about that. But the rumor is that she's frustrated at his passivity at this. And it's funny that my recent piece in Jacobin,
I'll throw that up here on the screen,
which took off in Germany for some reason, or at least the tweet about it being translated into German took off. My thesis is exactly that the cool head strategy worked in an initial moment, the initial skirmish with Trump, when he threatened tariffs as president-elect and in February and March. But that you can't stop imperial antagonism with personal charm and a cool head approach alone. You simply can't, because we know how the United States rolls. They go, No, the good Mexican word is chingaquedito, right? They just kind of fucking with you all the time. And they start something low, and then you start trying to ratchet it up. And they try to put you in a lose-lose situation where if you respond, they have the excuse to respond more strongly. And if you don't respond, they walk all over you. So she has to avoid the lose-lose, which is why they try to back you into. And this is all, I talk about it in the piece.
We'll throw a link in the comments.
It can be avoided, but it requires astute diplomacy. It requires regional coordination. It requires strategic alliances. It requires economic diversification. It just requires guts.
Guts.
Right? And it requires an active stance on the part of the Foreign Relations Ministry, which has been totally absent. So if people are frustrated with Juan Ramón de la Fuente, you certainly have every right to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that this piece kind of was on that same line, and then that kind of traveled around quite a bit. So we'll see.
Careful, maybe the foreign ministry is going to start hitting you up for asesorías.
All right.
One final note on this.
Not gonna happen. But
which is that I always like to think of Mexico as the bridge between the North and the South. I think we occupy an important place in that sense.
As a bridge, as a natural bridge.
As a natural.
I also mentioned that there too. A geographic bridge.
And in that case, while there have been some important steps when it's come to confronting the genocide against the Palestinian people, it hasn't been the voice that I think Mexico could occupy on the international stage when it comes to
as the 12th largest economy.
Exactly. Right. And I think we're falling short on that. And of course, Juan Ramón de la Fuente in particular
is a Zionist.
Yeah. And he's beloved by Zionists.
Yeah.
So perhaps some of that passivity isn't by accident on his part, considering what is the international issue today. It's the ongoing genocide against Palestine.
And so I think it's an interesting sign. All of this is to say, and we'll get to this in a minute, that Mexico is participating in the emergency summit convened by the Hague Group, emergency summit of states to halt the genocide. And they decided late in the game what they did decide, and that doesn't seem like something Juan Ramón de la Fuente would decide in favor of. So if the rumor is true, this might seem to be evidence of the fact that either he's on his way out or he lost this argument.
His influence has definitely waned. Yeah. All right, moving on to our next topic here, the shifting attitudes. We want to start with this poll from Gallup, and I'm going to read extensively from some of the figures that come out here, and then we'll break it down for you as well. So I want to go ahead and read this bit for you. Americans have shown markedly more positive towards immigration over the last year, with a share wanting immigration dropping from 55% in 2024 to 30% today. At the same time, a record high 79% of U.S.
79%. 4 out of 5 Americans
say immigration is a good thing for the country. There's another bit here around the actual enforcement I think is actually really important to highlight here. In addition to supporting increased or stable immigration levels, more Americans now favor offering undocumented immigrants pathways to citizenship, while fewer support stringent measures to deter or reverse illegal immigration. So the number that I find most compelling here, support for allowing undocumented immigrants to become U.S. citizens has risen to 78% from 70% last year. This is back to level support seen in 2019. Approval is still higher. There'll be a change for individuals brought to U.S. illegally as children, with support holding above 80%. So people don't want a border wall anymore. People don't want these insane, violent raids that we've been seeing time and time again in places all over the United States. And people are generally in favor of immigration. So,
and about the citizenship. People are against everything that's in the big, beautiful bill.
Here's the figure I was saying. Backing for expanding U.S.-Mexico border wall has dropped 8 points to 45%. So below that 50% threshold now. Even this issue that the Democrats even joined in wanting to, we're not going to build a wall, we're going to build a smart wall. But
same thing. With Israeli spyware.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Trump. I mean, he's managed to create a national consensus, something the Democrats never managed or even cared about, in favor of immigration because of his brutal, dumbass raids and racism.
And just as his big, beautiful bill is dumping mountains of money on, declines in support for hiring more border agents and deporting all undocumented are mainly due to less support from independents and Democrats. So they less people now even want Border Patrol. They don't ask specifically around ICE in this poll, but you can assume that generally the attitudes are.
Well, a separate poll that I looked the other day has ICE approval rating, which was at 0 not too long ago, as many approved as disapproved. ICE is now at -17 in the latest poll I saw in approval. Trump's handling of immigration, depending on the polls you see, is either at -7 down to -27. Wow. -27 on his key issue, on his major issue, the issue that he's always polled best at, that he basically won on.
It was crucial to his victory. Yeah.
And all of this is before, ICE gets its 10 times worth of funding until 178 billion is thrown into more ICE raids, hiring more people, basically deputizing state and local police by bribing them and building alligator Alcatrazes all over the country. He's underwater on this issue before all of that infrastructure is being built out, which is now, that's what's going to happen now. That's what's going to happen now. Right?
So if anything, what is likely, if this trend holds, it's just going to continue to decline.
You can see it leading up to a real clash.
Exactly.
Because, numbers approving of it have tanked, approving of ICE have tanked, approving of migration have increased, the wall decreased, a path to citizenship increased, all of that before the worst of it actually happens. Right? People have already been out in the streets. Not just in Los Angeles, in, lily white areas in Massachusetts. Yeah. People have been out in the streets. Good for them. Good for everybody.
Even in your own stomping grounds, right?
Yeah, close by. Imagine now when they have thousands of more agents. Right? When, with all the state and local cops that they're going to have, doing their dirty work for them. Because it's easier for them to have state and local cops arrest them and then hand them over to ICE. Because it's less a visual, it's creates less of a stir.
Yeah. And this isn't just a migrant issue. This isn't just a Latino issue, right? I saw a video that actually, it hit me pretty hard. It was ICE officers, kind of trying to intimidate somebody who had been following them and tracking their movements, right? Banging on the windows, demanding you open the door, saying, he's like, this individual was a U.S. citizen. So, he's like, I don't have to do anything, right? You can't do anything to me. But his answer was, he's like, look, why are you following us? He's like, because you're kidnapping.
Because you're kidnapping my neighbors. Yep. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the sentiment, right? Like, hey, forget whether or not this person came here illegally. You're kidnapping my members. There was even a MAGA person at a demonstration against these raids, right? In full MAGA gear. There's a weakness to this kind of hard-headed approach.
And that's before the 178 billion is going to be spent on building out all this infrastructure. Tell us about the numbers in Mexico.
Absolutely. So, on the other hand, we also have this. This is from the Pew Research Center.
This is interesting.
69% of Mexicans have an unfavorable opinion of the U.S. And for those of you who are not joining us on video, you can see this image here on the screen, which shows the different presidencies, generally kind of floating with favorable approval ratings in general, except for the Trump administration. That's where you see this massive decline. As soon as Trump comes in, following Obama and following Biden, you see this massive crash in favorable opinion of the United States. And even that is compared to Bush, who was not very popular here in Mexico.
No, he wasn't.
Either. Obama was, Biden was accepted, tolerable,
just
a blip, really. But you can see that, of course, this has a consequence in terms of attitudes, and as a consequence for the U.S. as well. I've seen a lot of coverage around the drop in tourism to the United States. Yeah. Obviously, there's not too much tourism compared to like Canada, for example, to the U.S. from Mexico, because obviously Mexicans have to get a visa, and it's not easy, and often you'll be denied for whatever reason that the bureaucrat decides. But
as arbitrary as Christopher Landau trying to cancel somebody's visa on Twitter.
Yeah,
as arbitrary and stupid as they all can be.
Yeah. And so there you have more evidence that there are consequences to this hard-headed approach.
Yeah. And, that poll, the YouGov poll, where Trump is at 39% approval, he's at 35% approval among Latinos. Now, that's actually going back to about historic numbers in the sense that historically, the Latino community, which is a very diverse community, so I certainly don't mean to generalize, tend to vote for Democrats by a 2-to-1 margin. That's been historical, more or less, stable figure. That's gotten eaten away at in recent years as the Democrats have just sucked because they've sucked with everyone. Except, actually Sanders in 2020 had massive Latino support, the whole Tio Bernie phenomenon. But then Trump had record support among the Latino community in this last election. It was still a minority, but it was much closer to 50-50. So it's back. The fact that it's back down to 35% just in a few months, it's back to historic numbers and probably on its way down.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, these are obviously figures from people in Mexico and their view of the U.S. But I think
I don't mean to mix. This YouGov poll was in the United States.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry. So I don't mean to mix. That he has 35% Latino support in the United States. The poll you mentioned is in Mexico, where 70% of Mexicans have an unfavorable rating in the United States. 7 out of 10. Sorry about that.
No problem. And one final note on this before we move on to our next topic. How disappointing to see the approach of the Democrats to the immigration issue, given how fast attitudes changed, right? When Biden was running back in the year 2000, 2020?
2020,
2021.
No, 2020, it was 2020. Yeah.
There was, a lot of discussion about better attitudes towards migrants. They deserve to be treated with human rights, all the rest of it. Many of his actions on his second day in office were executive orders around the issue of migration. But as the issue became more complicated for them, they abandoned those positions and kind of played into this and allowed Trump to shift that discussion further to the right, so that we have the scenes that we're seeing. I think they have responsibility.
And the Biden administration actually ran to the right in the sense of they were then accusing Republicans of not wanting to pass their punitive border bill, to not give them a win on migration. So they were to the right, for strategic reasons, but they were to the right of Republicans on that because they wanted a punitive bill that wouldn't pass Congress under Biden. Just nuts.
Yeah, there were ads from Kamala Harris around that. Like, I'm tough on the border. The picture of her in that.
The Republicans didn't want to pass our punitive bill, right? Yeah, kind of Kristi Noem, kind of dressing up. Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
The cosplaying.
Yeah.
And all that for what? To abandon a critical part of their coalition for short-term, not even gains, because it didn't win them anything. And now they're on the outside looking in again when it comes to this issue. It's stupid.
Now, when you see that 70% of Mexicans have an unfavorable view of the United States, you think that, well, now is a real time to go the multipolar route, actually. The Mexican public, by and large, has always been in favor of that. But all the more now that they see the whole thing laid bare in front of them.
So much so that I think they're willing to endure short-term
some hardships, which there would be. Shifting away from an economic dependence in the United States is not going to be easy. It's like, shifting away from an iceberg. It's like it's not easy. You have to really do that, pull that pull that wheel. It's not easy. There's going to be short and medium term pain there because it requires a whole structural adjustment in the economy. But it can and must be done. And look at the numbers on people on the unfavorable rating in the United States, and just look at we were talking about seeing models too. Lula has gotten so vanilla in his third term that he was trying to basically almost gift BRICS to the G20 on a silver platter, saying we're gonna coordinate and we're gonna have all these connections between the G20 and BRICS, and we're gonna leave Venezuela out because we know that's what Uncle Sam wants. Boom, they get the tariff anyway. It's like you can't try to play nice with the United States because they will slap you around anyway. Anyway, you think people don't see that? You think you don't see their own ostensible allies getting thrown systematically under the bus and then getting lectured at and sermoned at? Just like when the UNAM publishes that article about trading opportunities with China, and you get Christopher Landau saying, "Why are you writing this?" What the hell? You think people don't see that? So all of a sudden, you've got China, Japan, and Korea talking, historical enemies. You've got the EU talking to China. You've got Latin American countries talking more. You've got this emergency summit with over 20 countries. Things are happening in the world, and the United States is leaving themselves out of it. Mexico can't, because I think that's the worst of kind of the idea that Sheinbaum has tried to project. Like, we are going to convince the United States to be nice to us by promising even deeper economic integration. It's like, well, is that working? Is that working? It would only make Mexico more dependent.
Yeah. And I really do think, Sheinbaum and López Obrador talked about how this is one of the most politicized places on the planet. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
it's one of them.
This is where you cash it in. So you explain to the masses, hey, we're going to start looking for other options. And it's going to take a while for those to pay off. And maybe we'll receive some kind of response by the United States for daring to talk to BRICS or something of the sort, right? I think the people will be willing to endure it. If they're willing to show up nearly 400,000 people on 3 days' notice and fill the historic center of Mexico City to defend our sovereignty, I think the Mexican population is willing to deal with that if it means over the long term, better futures for our families, for our children, for generations down the road.
No, I get it too. I get it. The idea is, with cool head in all these negotiations, is buy time so that Mexico can industrialize to the Plan Mexico, right? So it can execute its industrial policy, so it can be in a stronger position to do that diversification. I understand that as well, right? We're going to try to buy time over here, keep the tariffs at bay, so that we can be implementing our Plan Mexico. Right? And that Plan Mexico has to be a real industrial strategy rather than, just
serving the interests of foreign capital.
Just subsidies, just subsidies for foreign capital.
Yeah,
that's important, right?
Yeah.
There has to be an actual, real industrial policy, and not, we're going to get foreign products, here with subsidies and slap "Made in Mexico," labels on them, right? But the idea is to buy time, and I understand that. Mexico was so abused by neoliberalism and pre-pan governments. So the idea is to kind of neutralize foreign policy to allow time for the domestic projects to happen. But when you have a situation like this, you realize that you can't just always try to just neutralize foreign policy, because it's actually an integral part of domestic policy. If the whole project has been integrating into the United States, putting all your eggs in one basket, then you have a president who's willing to say, look, we have an asymmetric relationship with you, so we can bully you all we want. What are you going to do about it? Daring them to do something about it. Daring Mexico to do something about it. Well, you have to adjust to that as well.
That's right. All right, moving on to our next topic here. We're going to be talking about the Hague Group's Emergency Ministerial Conference. I want to share with you the post here from the Progressive International, which is involved in some of the organizing behind this initiative. But basically, this is an important gathering bringing together over 20 countries. There's a full list I'll share with you in just a minute here that is working to actually take concrete steps. I'll go ahead and just read a little bit here from the Progressive International's blog. This week, more than 25 states from around the world will gather in Bogota, Colombia, for the emergency conference to halt the Gaza Genocide, the most ambitious multilateral response since Israel began its campaign of devastation 2 years ago. The Bogota conference will go down as a moment in history that states finally stood up to do the right thing, said UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, calling for the formation of the Hague Group, the most significant political development of the last 20 months. And of course, worth mentioning that at this gathering, which is happening these days, and we'll have its second day as of July 16th, Mexico is attending. And it was, again, we mentioned this earlier, it was a bit of a late addition to the list of countries that is participating, but I'll go ahead and scroll down and share with you the full list here. Oh, I guess it's not here, but I'll go ahead and read it. So this brings together the co-chairs Colombia and South Africa, along with Algeria, Bolivia, Botswana, Brazil, Chile, China, Cuba, Djibouti, Honduras, Indonesia, Iraq, Ireland, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Namibia, Nicaragua, Norway, Oman, Pakistan, Palestine, Portugal, Qatar, Slovenia, Spain, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Turkey, Uruguay, and Venezuela. So a lot of countries representing diverse parts of the world. We have Latin America, we have West Asia, we have Africa, so many countries, Central America represented there. An important gathering, and I'm very grateful that Mexico is participating on this, and I hope that this is also a turning point in terms of the Mexican strategy around the ongoing genocide in Palestine, that there will be more action on behalf of Mexico and its place that it occupies on the international stage, advocating for the interests of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, you mentioned in that list there that we see on the screen, that it's an international community and all regions are represented. It's a real point of pride how well represented Latin America is.
Also that.
It's just amazing. Almost all the major states in Latin America are participating. Right? So Colombia is hosting. Mexico is going, as we mentioned, but also Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua, Uruguay, and Venezuela.
Don't forget St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
I'm sorry, St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. right?
Comrade Ralph.
Of course. That's amazing representation from Latin America. No other region in the world has that degree of representation of this Congress. None. I mean, Europe, brilla por su ausencia, shines by its absence, except, Spain and Portugal and Ireland. Good, great. Mm-hmm. Asia, Latin America is hosting and is the motor of this.
Right.
That is so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important as a region that has experienced colonialism, that has experienced imperialism, that has experienced U.S.-backed dictatorships until very recently, and knows exactly, what the dynamic is about. But has also been on the receiving end of very bad policy from Israel ever since Israel's inception. Israel has basically been the partner of the United States in some of the worst aspects of policy towards Latin America, doing its dirty work or supplying the arms when the U.S. couldn't because of certain embargoes, whatever else, financing those dictators. The U.S. could route stuff basically through Israel, helping out like the Maya genocide in Guatemala and Gomez Mont, and some of the stuff in Colombia, financing right-wing paramilitaries. Israel's track record in Latin America is atrocious.
Even more modern, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody in Chile points out, where did the police learn to shoot less lethal weapons at people's faces? From the Israelis. Mm-hmm. What is the software that's used to spy on human rights activists, land defenders, all the rest of it? Pegasus. And
as we talked about last week, Pegasus is also here in Mexico, as we well know.
Mm-hmm. So their reach continues to this day. Not to mention all of the diplomatic pressure they tried to apply precisely to avoid Latin American countries from pointing out that Israel's conducting a genocide.
That's right. And remember that Latin America was really ahead of the curve in recognizing Palestine as a state. About 15 years ago, there was a wave of governments that did that.
Spurred by Lula.
Spurred by Lula. And now it's really gratifying to see so many Latin countries stepping up now at a time when the rest of the world is totally negligent in this. Negligent and complicit.
Absolutely.
And as we've said here, right, this is why Mexico's voice is needed, because the global north, and not to make facile distinctions between north and south, but the Occident in general, quedó al desnudo, as you say in Spanish. The genocide has laid it all bare. The hypocrisies of international law, the hypocrisies of the world order, the hypocrisies of the United Nations, all these supposed institutions, frauds, shams, impotent, complicit, right? All these world leaders. There need to be new groupings, right? So all of a sudden, the United States is terrified about the rise of BRICS. Also, the United States was attacking just yesterday They were attacking this very meeting.
Yeah, they should sanction
as an attempt to weaponize international law. In other words, as an attempt to try to make international law do what it's supposed to do. That's weaponizing. That's weaponizing in this context. And what I have to say is Mexico's going as brave. Mexico's going as brave because it's happening in the context of the tariffs that I mentioned in the first segment, right? The new threat of 30% tariffs, the tariffs against tomatoes, the laundry list of microaggressions against Mexico over the course of the last several months, from closing the border to livestock, to the whole water issue, to the whole, Ovidio Guzman issue, to the Landau thing and the sanctions on the banks, and just one thing after the other. In the face of that, Mexico is doing the right thing and is going to this conference. So that is a step in the right direction for Mexico's foreign policy, and perhaps a sign that the rumors are not totally wrong, that Ramón de la Fuente is either on his way out or is losing a degree of influence there.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I want to finally just read their 3 objectives for the conference here. Collective diplomatic pressure. Expand the spirit of the Hague Group to create a unified international voice against Israel's violation of international law and to counter political and economic retaliation faced by individual states. Concrete legal measures. Move beyond symbolic condemnations to implement binding actions under international law, addressing the material enablers of genocide and war crimes. Finally, historic precedent for international solidarity, build on the legacy of global solidarity movements that have dismantled apartheid and other oppressive systems, setting a model for future coordinated responses to international law violations. So we'll see what comes out of this. We'll obviously report on this on the next show, at least give you an update in terms of what actually came out of it. But, we are journalists, but we're also human beings. And this is the cause of our times.
Yeah,
and so that we figured it was important to bring this up to you as well, and to stress that Mexico's participation is important and hopefully a turning point.
And let us also not forget, right, that Mexico was part of the countries that referred the case to the ICC,
correct,
International Criminal Court. So they were in on that, and that was also the correct thing to do.
And recognized Palestine for the first time.
Recognized Palestine for the first time a couple of years ago, actually.
Sheinbaum receiving the credentials of the first ambassador from the state of Palestine to Mexico. These are important steps. We don't want to undermine the actions.
Understate.
But we want more. We want more. As the streets in this city have been demanding almost on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
As we should. I think our brothers and sisters in Palestine deserve our solidarity.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on to our final topic, losers and haters. And this week, I was teasing you about this scene right here from The Wire. Omar takes the stand.
Classic.
He's being grilled by the gang's lawyer. And he responds to them, he's kind of going at him, right? He's like, oh, you robbed drug dealers and we're supposed to believe you. And he says like, well, I got the shotgun. You got the briefcase. And who are we talking about? Well, a real life example of that, Ovidio Guzman lawyer Jeffrey Lichman, who is literally being paid with blood money. Come on.
Totally.
Come on. Is that libelous? Maybe. Where do you think Ovidio Guzman got his money?
Yeah.
From selling chocolate bars? No, he's selling a very different product. And that's the man who's paying you. Mm-hmm. And yet, Ovidio Guzman lawyer has the gall to attack Sheinbaum, saying she acts as the PR arm of a narco organization.
Says the narco lawyer.
Unbelievable. Let me see if I can find his full quote here.
All of this, what you're looking for, is in the context of the fact that his client pled guilty. Right? It's not like he's on a crusade to demonstrate Ovidio Guzman's innocence, right? And the fact that he was framed by a state that has, wants to do him in. He pled guilty. He's looking for the most lenient sentence possible in exchange for testimony. Right?
So I found here his comments. He made some other ones in the actual press conference, grossly out of line, wildly inappropriate. I guess not too surprising from a narco lawyer, but says apparently the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, is displeased with my truthful comments about her corrupt office and government. She can call as many hastily convened press conferences as she likes, but the people of Mexico and myself know that she acts more as a public relations arm of a narcotics trafficking organization than as an honest leader that the Mexican people deserve.
Wow.
I'll have more to say on this.
He knows what the people of Mexico think.
Apparently he doesn't.
Amazing.
Because he really did try to cast her as unpopular, as, out of touch and all the rest of it when
he's just a conservative hack. If he's other posts and his other videos and such.
Some of these criminal lawyers have gigantic egos. I mean, it's not a surprise. He has his own podcast. He's out there trying to be famous and be one of these, news setting type of lawyers. Get some of the clients.
Distract away from his clients pleading guilty. And so the response of Claudia Sheinbaum, I think her response was initially correct and then wasn't, like we were talking about before, right? Because when this was brought up at her press conference, not hastily convened because she has one every morning, you would think anyone would know that who follows Mexico, right? She said, "I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with a narco lawyer," and that's where it should have ended. Just end it right there, right? But then she went on to, go after him, saying that it was, basically inappropriate and blah blah blah, and that they were going to sue him for defamation, but here in Mexico. Yeah, which has no effect.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Not going to go anywhere, and it's just giving this idiot more attention than he deserves. Why bother?
Yeah,
she should have just ended with, "I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with a narco lawyer." Next question.
Yeah. And our colleague, Jesus Garcia, was right. I'll bring up one of his tweets here and I'll read out in just a second. In pointing out that, this is a defeat for Lichman.
This is important.
Right? Like your client
This is important.
pleading guilty
Mm-hmm.
because clearly all of the case is overwhelming is not a good sign for you. I mean, it's a setback. He's now going to be a collaborator of the U.S. government.
And actually, he's the great white hope of the Mexican opposition, because they think he's the one who's going to, rat on testimony about narco Morena and narco government, and narco AMLO. They've got all their hopes pinned onto him.
Yeah.
Who extradited Ovidio to the United States in the first place? It was AMLO's government, and Mexican soldiers died in that effort.
Yeah.
They died in the effort to capture him. So let's have a little bit of respect, first of all, with that.
I want to read Jesus's comments here because I think it's actually quite telling, because he had a direct interaction with him because he's based out of the United States.
He was there, right?
He was there. He's the one who asked him this.
Yeah.
He's like, quote, interestingly, Lichman Law said he is not a politician when I asked him if he supports the U.S. running a unilateral operation in Mexico, violating Mexican sovereignty. Still, with this answer, after President Sheinbaum's reaction, he sounds more like a politician than any lawyer I have seen in court. And this is the key part here. He says, I wish attorneys like him were willing to talk about how their cartel clients pay them with shadow money, since they do not have another job but being cartel leaders. The big question here is whether the judicial system makes use of money laundering legitimate. I actually think that's really fair. And Jesus mentioned this elsewhere, where this actually came up in the trial for El Chapo Guzman, Ovidio's father.
I did.
And apparently the judge, Kogan there, was like, no, it's fine. Come on. No están viendo la cara, as we say here, right? They're literally laughing in our faces. We know where that money comes from. That's Lichman pays his mortgage with drug money.
Didn't the right wing here make a whole stink about a supposed narco lawyer running for judge as one of the judgeships here?
Yep.
But they're loving Lichman, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So which one is it?
What is it? Yeah. You actually have to decide, actually. Right?
Here's my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have shotguns.
You got the briefcase.
Yeah. All right, Kurt, we've reached the end of another program here, just about at the 1 hour mark. Any last comments before we say goodbye?
That was a great chocolate bar. I'm looking forward to my chocolate de bienestar.
Yes.
Together with beans, corn,
50%
honey,
cacao.
50% cacao.
That's actually much tastier.
It is much tastier.
It's not just a sugar bomb.
Anywhere.
In fact, I shouldn't have eaten this because I kind of have a little bit of a headache from all the sugar that's in this.
You took one for the team there.
I did.
You took one for the team.
It's all for the viewers and listeners.
And it's all for the viewers and listeners. And it's just so great, that the fact that there's going to be public grocery stores just sets people into a tizzy, So, right. So, Mom Danny, get some Bienestar products in those stores in the 5 boroughs.
Yes. He's probably going to win. It'd be great. They asked him, what's your first foreign trip going to be? I know he said he's going to focus on New York. Why don't you make it Mexico City?
Come on down. He did a good video in Spanish.
He did. He knows clearly. He actually spoke well of her.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well.
So, there's never a dull moment in U.S.-Mexico relations, and we will continue here.
All right. As always, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share with your friends. Special shout out to all of our channel supporters, members. Really appreciate it. We're already working. As soon as we wrap up here, we're going to order the new equipment.
Thanks to your donations and support. We're going to order the equipment right now. That's exactly right.
And we're going to step it up a notch just for you. I don't think it'll be ready next week.
But soon.
But soon.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Take care.